Good morning, or rather good afternoon. This is Eric.Britton. I'm speaking to you from Lyon and about to have an interview with a Brazilian reporter, Bolivar Torres Correa, who works for O Globo, which is one of the most, if not the most respected newspaper in Brazil, who wants to talk about Brazil, cities, transport, and cars, mobility, this sort of thing. And so I decided to record at least my participation in this, and I hope you'll be able to pick him up on the telephone relay. So this is just an experiment. It is not meant too seriously, but it also is an attempt to share some of this. I should mention that I believe that the reason he contacted me in the last days, although he did not say as much, is that he had read an article that appeared in The Guardian about a new book by Charles Montgomery called The Happy City. And, Charles and I had discussed this book on a number of occasions, and he kindly, somewhere in it, makes a few references to me, which reached Sao Paulo, and now here I am in Lyon about to talk to you about all of this. So I'll cut this off for the time being, or I'll try to pause it, and then I hope that I will be able to continue. Let's see how all this works. Okay, as I promised you, our friend Bolivar has just called in, and we're going to try to give you at least my end of the conversation, and if the sound system is up to it, also allow you to hear his questions. So Bolivar, thanks for traveling virtually all of these thousands of miles, and let me have your first question.
Okay, so you know Brazil, and certainly you know the context of the cities here in Brazil, and since the 70s, the cities are conceived around cars, for cars, and so the streets are not very pedestrian friendly, and I know that a lot of cities, including capitals in developing countries like Bogota, um, are doing something different, but Brazil is still not really in advance on that. Um, the country still thinks in terms of old mobility. So how can we go to another mentality and do this transition from old to new mobility?
Okay, that's a great question, and thanks for the background. Basically, what we have here is in something like a sick person, you know, and uh, we can be sure that the wrong place to start is transportation. There are two ends of this issue which are really determinant, and transportation is sort of, once you get the two ends kind of right, transportation then will become better. And one end of it is the city, you know, the city, the context, the built environment, the city plan, the regulations that determine densities, the heights of buildings, the light, the air, all of this. It's this broad environment which is the starting point. And so if you take a prefix on what you think is a specific transportation problem, you're probably going to come up with an answer which is not the most powerful one you could get. And at the other end of this spectrum is man, which men, women, and children of various conditions, and among them, the sort of, if this were a movie, the star actor would be coming in, and he's big and he's bad, and he is the car owner driver. And the car owner driver has a vision of his own requirements. And I know about this because I've owned a car for many years, and I have a not unaffectionate relationship with my cars in the past. At present, I don't, and I'm probably happier for it. But my cars have helped me on many occasions, and it would be silly of me to forget it, particularly since uh, there are a lot of other people who think like that. So we need to get out the psychiatrist's couch and put both the city and the everyone on it, but particularly the drivers, and figure out what is it that makes them tick. You know, did you see the video about 2 years ago of a driver driving through a group of cyclists on a what was it, a cycling occasion in Porto Alegre?
Yes, unfortunately.
And you can see this, and what's interesting about it is that the images that were taken before the driver went crazy. And what you could do was you could see the exchanges. The cyclists were not very nice. They express the aggressiveness that they feel because biking in the traffic in Delhi or Porto Alegre or Penang is a highly conflicted event. And you can see the people in the car gradually going crazy. So this is a kind of a microcosm. These are the things that we need to be able to understand, because we know that the future of the city is a lot less cars, but still plenty of cars, and the cars moving in different ways and in different places. And in order to achieve this, we're going to need to listen to the population as a whole, to listen to the drivers, and to listen to the people who think that their businesses depend on drivers, like commerce. They say if we don't have adequate parking, we're going to go out of business. We listen to the developers, in which they explain to us that what they need to do is they need to build the towers, you see, because the land is very expensive. And so the higher the tower is, the more profit that they make. And we need to be able to maturely take all of this into consideration. So this is a process of sociological, anthropological, historical, economic, and almost neurological awareness that we need to engage if we are to find a way out of the problem. Because it is a rare thing that a single project will make a difference. Now, some of the most successful single projects in the world have been the ciclovías. Another one, somebody might say, car-free days. Well, car-free days are a pretty good idea, but the problem with the car-free day, and I should really know about it, shouldn't I, since I am the guy who started that idea in 1994, I think it was. The problem with the car-free day is that it's supposed to have two aspects. One of them is to have a car-free event in which you look at the city with fewer cars and begin to think about how you would like it to be. But the other one is to create a scorecard. And this is what we're going to do in the coming year in order to make our city a more agreeable and a safer place to get around in. And almost no cities have done the report card. So one of the things that I hope is that we'll be able to do this, and it's a tool. But all of this is very general, and so and maybe I've run away from a part of your question, so let me just give the word to you.
Okay. You said that we need to embrace the complexity of a city, not only the public transportation, but even in human experience. So how that the cities in the future gonna be, and how do you think the ideal city?
Well, let me see. Gilberto Peñalosa, a city in which it is safe for people from 8 to 80 to walk and cycle in. That seems like a pretty good idea for a city. But let's think about the reason why cities should be giving attention to what we call the new mobility agenda today. And one of them is that if they don't, they will lose in a competition which is very important for them and for their survival. And that is, in the 21st century, cities compete. So if Sao Paulo, uh, the third ranking champion in automobile chaos, if Sao Paulo does not get its act together, then industry and young Brazilians are going to go to places in which they can have a better life. So the best and the brightest will leave. And so your city becomes poorer, and your city, which is an unpleasant place to live in, will not be a place in which international industry will want to come and set up factories or set up service groups. They just won't want to go there, because they know that their best employees will not follow. So the city itself must work from self-interest. It is in our self-interest to become a more beautiful, a more quiet, a more efficient, and a more economic place in which to live. So that's a part of it. The second is that the hundreds, really, but let's talk about dozens of ideas that represent particular building blocks for a new mobility agenda are almost all highly cost effective and lend themselves to being done with very little massive investments in terms of infrastructure, and can be done in relatively short periods of time. Now, I've tried to explain this in the Sustainable Penang Toward a New Mobility Agenda report, which is just being completed. And if that can be useful to you, you may want to get yourself a glass of white wine and sit down and spend an hour with it.
Okay, and can we say that today the cities that were conceived for cars are more unhappy? And can we find some studies that prove that people who live for cars are more unhappy than the pedestrian cities?
Well, I myself, I'm not exactly a researcher. My field is public policy and strategies. But I follow the work of my colleagues in this field, and there certainly is a correlation between people who drive cars and their health. As opposed to somebody who walks to work or walks a lot, or just somebody who bicycles a lot. And health is happiness. In French, which you know and speak so beautifully, they always say, soon it's going to be the new year, and they say, bonne année, et avant tout, bonne santé. And that is not stupid. And I, at the age of 75, for example, I wake up every day and I say, nothing hurts. This will not last forever, but I'd like to thank someone up there for the fact that I can begin a day with my health. And but the difficulty is that there is a old Chinese saying which goes that an Arabic saying which goes that a man on a camel seeking a camel, a man riding a camel seeking a camel will never find the camel because he's on the camel. And so as a result of the cars are not just transportation, but they're also transformation. And all you have to do is sit down and talk to anybody who, do you live in Sao Paulo?
No, in Rio.
In Rio. Okay, you talk to anyone in Rio who has a car and who lives 30 kilometers from the center. And you say, did you always live there? And they will say, no, I used to live in Rio. And why did you move out there? Well, I moved out there because I could have a much larger place for the kids to play and fresh air, and uh, uh, I thought it would be best for our family. And I said, but why did you do it then? He said, well, we got a car, and that permitted us to do it. So what happens is that transportation, if it was only just a car, it wouldn't be such a problem, but it's also everything that surrounds the organization of the family and his work and his life. So you have, and this is where we talk about systemic complexity. And if you do not have the intellectual curiosity to wander through the jungle of systemic complexity, then you're probably not going to get too far in developing a new mobility agenda for the city.
And could you, how design urban plans and architecture can change the velocity that people move,
Mm-hmm.
and how the design um, affects our behavior?
Yeah, basically, um, when we're confronted with a problem, we always tend to think that the problem is somehow the framework of that we need to somehow resolve. But really, there's an ongoing process. And I remember when I first went to Brasilia, and this was in the late 70s, and I visited, and I was received by the president and by ministers, etc. It was all very nice. Driven around a lot, and I thought to myself what probably you would think about as well, and many other younger people. I was younger at the time, and I thought about what an awful place to live. And then I met a guy called Ralph Gackenheimer, and Ralph is a professor of urban and transport planning at MIT. And Ralph and I walked through the favelas, and we thought to ourselves, this is a pretty nice place to live, and because they were self-organized, and I don't know how they look today, but they looked quite hopeful at the time. Uh, so the question is, I think, I'm a very lazy person, and so what I always try to think of is what is the easiest way of solving this problem, or if I can't solve it, at least advancing it so that maybe at some later point I will be able to actually solve it. And what we've done in Penang and what I recommend in all cities is to see if you can find a certain number of relatively small things that will have little public resistance that you can do to begin to start to show the way. And to take, for example, the year of 2014, in the case of Penang, and we've identified about 40 different things that they could be looking at and possibly doing them, and some of them, so elementary that you wonder that they're not already there. For example, equipping buses with a public announcement system which informs the passengers a minute or so in advance of what the next stop is. And of course, this is absolutely essential for blind or visually impaired people, particularly when they're traveling an unfamiliar route. But it's also essential for mothers with children and people with shopping and the distracted professors who are reading a book. By the way, I hope that today there are still professors reading books on buses in Brazil and not driving to work all by themselves. And so this thing, which doesn't cost very much money, makes one more small difference. And so you try to find a number of things that could make one more small difference. And then you begin to get some credibility. And this credibility will allow you to undertake larger challenges. Now, maybe this is the time in which we might want to shift the conversation, but I leave this up to you. And that is, instead of talking in more abstract terms, um, are you interested in talking about, uh, are there any initiatives which could be carried out in the Brazilian cities that are hosting the World Cup or the Olympic Games in the coming months? Should we talk
Sure,
about that?
sure. What can we do? Concrete things here in large cities like São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro, and
Well, this is, again, an enormous opportunity. And what we can say is you would like to do something which will make the city a more efficient and agreeable place to get around in during the games, but that it will also, because you've thought about it, THINK, you've thought about it, and you want to create something that will be permanent within those cities. To follow the example of Barcelona, who essentially started to restructure a city that was suffering from deindustrialization, and they're not the only ones. So can the games be used to jumpstart not just something that will, you, as they did in London recently, you have police and you don't have any cars coming in and you have the buses, but then afterward everything goes back to normal. You don't want things to be normal ever again. You want to see if you can find some ideas that will be useful in the near term and that will also serve to create a new model of urban mobility for the future, or at least steps in the right direction. Now, there's not a great deal of time, and I'm not there, but I would really, I would really like to be there and work with someone smarter than me who is in a position to reject the worst of the ideas and to start to implement the best of the ideas um, starting on Monday morning.
and there's I think a particularity in Brazilian cities. I believe you must know that.
Would you say that again and speak louder for the microphone?
Okay. What I'm saying that there is a particularity in Brazilian cities that the downtown area um, are really not a place where people socialize. During the week they work, and it's a place of transition, and we go to work and to do bureaucratic things. And during the weekend, it's empty.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like cities in Europe, like Lyon, for example,
Mm-hmm.
that have a downtown and everyone is there, and you have coffees and restaurants, and the downtown is the heart of the city. And here, it's the opposite. The downtown during the weekend it's empty, and nobody wants to live there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Well, there are two images that you can kind of draw, which may help us to understand this. The first is that travel patterns in the 21st century are many to many. They're many to many and 24/7. And the travel patterns in the 20th century, in which the transportation system was being designed, really mimic those of the 19th century. And that is, there were basically one-to-one or many-to-one. People were being brought into the central city, by and large. And if you wanted to go from one suburb to another, it was difficult unless you had a car and they did a ring road. But as we're seeing in Beijing, which has now just completed its 8th ring road and is contemplating the 9th, ring roads do not necessarily solve problems. What they do is they just simply up the ante, so it gets worse every time. Now, and the second image is that of the polycentric city. So basically, even cities like Paris or Amsterdam are, when you're actually, or Lyon, are actually, when you're there are really a series of cities of different size And each of them has or could have its own agreeable urban core. So the goal of transportation and city policy should be to make these peripheral cities great places to be in, and places in which you can get around without necessarily using your car. And so the planning framework changes. It's no longer a city and its hinterland, but it's the polycentric cities, and each of them is a challenge in themselves. But they will also compete with each other, as we're seeing in Paris, for example. And one of those peripheral cities, say Le Bolivar Torres or Montrouge, will come up with a good idea. It doesn't take very long for the best of those ideas to appear in others of these competing cities. So it's been a long time since I've been in Rio, but I'm sure that if we got into a helicopter or looked through Google Earth, maybe that would be cheaper and more environmental, you would be able to explain to me the cities within the city. And so the goal of transportation policy is to work with mayors and local government in each of those cities to make them as complete as you can. And then what will happen eventually as the pressure comes off, because even though a great deal of destruction has been carried out by previous governments of the traditional cities, I would imagine that in most parts of Brazil today, the traditional city still is there. It's just very small and rather dilapidated. So the question is how to bring it back to life. And this is, again, a very exciting challenge. And it's not only a transportation challenge, it's really a city challenge. And it's not only city planning, but it is also has a great deal to do with our relationships with each other and our relationship with government. And the wild card that we have is civil society. And government has to learn how to work with civil society, and civil society, the environmental groups, the transportation groups, the bike groups, the pedestrian groups, the taxpayers groups, have to learn to work with and guide government. And we're really early on in this process.
Okay. Thank you very much for the interview and for your answers. And good luck to you here in France.
Good. Thanks. And if you wish, because I speak very fast and I am sometimes very abstract, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me, and I can try to clarify.
Sure. No, I will do that. And where can I find it on YouTube the interview?
I'm going to send you the reference as soon as I upload it. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Listen. A big hug. Take care of yourself, and we'll be talking.
Perfect. Thank you.
Goodbye.